Not sure if that worked. Just let me check.
It's saying streaming on Facebook.
It is? Okay. I'll just give that a second and check. Oh, yes, we are live. Well, what do you know? I did it again. My technical skills are improving. It is a new year, 2021. Happy New Year, Mark. Always good to chat.
Happy New Year.
Well, it is a new year, and we thought we'd have a new discussion about it being a new year and about the normal conversation that goes on at this time of year, which is a bunch of BS. And well, I'll let you start. I'll let you start. Elders first. I respect my elders, so I'll let you go.
Well, we started this conversation before we went live about goal setting and resolutions and all of the usual intention for the beginning of the new year.
Big intentions.
Good intentions. And, you know, I've been doing this for a long time and it doesn't change. Every year it's the same scenario. And what hits me and strikes me based on the success that both of us have had is that the people that wait until the first of the year to set their goals and set their intentions and set their resolutions are going to be waiting to start the next year with the same goals and intentions. They're always waiting. And the ones that realize there is no value in delaying your start are the ones that get the results. And I think when I think on this, the thing that really lands for me is that the action takers are not worried about getting it perfect. They're making it mostly right, and they're fixing what's wrong. And the second thing is that I've been shocked and surprised about is that when we start this process, there's always a game plan. This is how I'm going to do it. This is my business plan. This is my approach. This is my marketing plan. And I'm shocked every year, every cycle, by how much the reality changes from what the plan is. So essentially, if we think we're going to get it right by waiting and thinking about it, we're absolutely kidding ourselves. There's no way that we can do it because the market's going to validate what's right for the market.
Yeah, very true. It reminds me of when I first started in business and when I first really was looking into businesses and, you know, I had a couple of companies before I started online and that sort of thing, of doing big business plans. We had a company with a couple of friends years ago and we were called into the offices of the Macquarie Bank. They wanted to give us $3 million to, you know, take half the company and, you know, let us work for them for the privilege. But they wanted a big business plan. And it's funny that you just don't hear much talk about business plans these days because you have to be nimble. And
it's the agile model, the agile software model, and, you know, working with a Scrum approach and sprints is the recognition of the change of our global economy, going from an industrial model where you design it and it's going to be good for 20 or 30 years to one where you've got a 24-month life on your business model.
Yeah, it's, you know, what happens to all those business plans when COVID hits? You know, it's like they make good fire starters and that's about it. But it's interesting, you know, this whole topic, like we were discussing it with my group yesterday and bringing it back to, I was kind of reminding them that, like, looking at business as okay, I've got to like start and stop again every year is a very short-term view. And you've got to be able to take the longer term view and have a vision, but be nimble enough to change on the fly to get to that vision. Otherwise, you know, like you said, you get caught up. And I actually heard, I think Andy Frisella ranting about this the other day, angry and mad of people setting their intentions every year only to come to the next year and set the same intentions again, you know, and do it for the previous 10 years. And it's such a common thing. You know, you have to be, if you're not changing your intentions and your plans and your actual goals and targets, it's pretty obvious you're not growing. And yet people with the same goal of, I'm going to lose 20 pounds, or I'm going to, you know, whatever it might be, they're not progressing as a person. And that's probably the bigger thing. You can't, if you're not progressing as a person, your business isn't going to progress either.
You know, in the expert's handbook that you wrote so brilliantly a few years ago, one of the best parts of that book is designing your perfect day. And designing your perfect day is beginning with the end in mind. This is where I want to end up.
Yeah.
And I see so many business owners that are making tactical steps and tactical plans that are going nowhere. And they would be so much better off to step back and say, what is, you know, begin with the end in mind. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in mind. What does that end mean for you? Because in an agile model, the agile model is based on the premise that we're starting today and in the future, we're going to end up at point B. And there are many, many ways to end up in point B, some of which may not even be built yet. They may be building a new interstate that's not even open and not on the map that will allow us to save tremendous amount of time. They may be building a new airport with service to a major market that we currently are not being served by, that we would have to drive to, that could take weeks to get to it. So we don't know what the future is going to hold unless we really focus on what our intent is, because every opportunity that presents itself, every shiny, you know, object, we are drawn to the shiny objects because we don't have a clear intent of what our end goal, our end result is. But when you begin with the end in mind, it's very easy to say, is this moving me toward that objective, or is it moving me away from that? Or is it holding me in a state of no decision or no movement? There's only 3 things that can happen. It slows you down or stops you. It keeps you in a state of 0 movement forward, or it moves you toward that goal. And having that simple 3 solution choice will go tremendously towards simplifying your decisions and simplifying the paralysis of analysis, and all the things that entrepreneurs are so prone to engage in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, like the perfect day exercise isn't a new exercise. It's not my exercise, but I did adjust it to my way of thinking, because the premise to that was, well, the premise to that is, what actually makes you happy? And for me, it's going back to when you're a little kid, and what are you doing then? What are the words and the feelings and that sort of thing that are in your life that make you happy, and then bringing that forward into now. And the perfect day is more about how you're feeling, who you're hanging out with, the conversations you're having, versus a business plan and targets, because it's much easier to rate your day and say, okay, well, I was actually happy all day long and I hung out with good people, versus I find a lot of people that chase targets are very unhappy.
I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on this.
Chasing. Well, yeah, you go.
I was going to say, growing up as a young boy, I lived in a very, very isolated area. I literally grew up in the desert away from everybody. So it would be like growing up in the outback in Australia.
Right.
It was
Whereabouts was that, Mark?
New Mexico.
Oh, right. Okay. Right.
Okay. So my father was a geologist, and they were doing a mining operation in the middle of the desert for uranium in the 1950s. So
Oh, wow.
we were lived in the middle of nowhere. My bus ride to school every day was 90 miles.
Holy.
We were in the middle of nowhere. And I was a very, very curious young man. And my father, who, recognized this perceptively, uh, every weekend or every month, depending on how the timing went, he would allow me to go to the junkyard, and he would give me either a dime or a quarter to buy anything I wanted. And the rule was that whatever I bought, I had to take it apart and be able to put it back together before I could buy the next thing. So this was at 5 years old. I started this at 5 years old, and it became a lifelong obsession with me to figure out how things work.
Much
And
much to what you're doing now.
exactly. And the thing that was so motivating out of that was every day was about curiosity and discovery. And I knew that I would be learning something new every single day. And if we look at the entrepreneurs that we work with, how many of them are stuck and bored with life? They're not searching, they're not seeking, they're not embracing curiosity and exploration.
Yeah, it's wow, like funny you say that. Like, it's so interesting. And I don't want to dive back into that. I want to take that in a little bit of a different direction, because yesterday in our group conversation, I was also talking about obsession and how like you have to become obsessed. And this goes back to being a child. You become obsessed with the things that you love. You with curiosity. For me, it was a little bit different, but it's those things you become obsessed with, you become amazing at.
Right.
And I was saying to the guys yesterday, instead of just going for a target and trying to learn a skill,
Right.
find out what the big leverage point is and become absolutely obsessed by the work in that, not by the result, but by the work of that, until it becomes like an art form. When you can do your art and you're obsessed by your art, the results naturally come.
I remember many, many times being so focused on what I was doing that I would look up and think, oh, I'm getting kind of hungry. And it would be dark outside, and it would be 6 or 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was so focused on that. And it was later, much later in life, that I realized where I was in that concentration was a state of flow. And I was in the zone. I was totally focused. And you call it obsessed, it's the same thing. And it was not until probably maybe 3 or 4 years ago that I discovered this really great book by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. He's got more consonants in his name ever, but Mikhail,
the longest second name
ever. But
yeah.
Flow it's one of my absolute all-time favorites. I've read it, gosh, probably half a dozen times, if not more, because it talks about getting into the state of flow. And what does it take to be in flow? What does it take to focus your energy and focus your attention and just literally flow with time? It's a fabulous position to be in. It's an incredible state.
I mean, that's kind of what's behind the perfect day exercise. It's so that you're able to be in flow 24/7. Now, no one achieves that. I know from my sporting days that you would spend, I mean, we would probably spend minutes a day, minutes in flow, complete flow, where there's no conscious thought. It's purely a
muscle memory
type stuff. And, you know, for me, it's a pursuit of that. Yeah. And I find it like this is, I found the transition from sporting to business quite hard because of that flow state.
So slow.
Well, the flow state is very different. The flow state's it's the same but different. You know, sporting world, it's excitement, it's action. There's lots of, you know, danger and risk and all that sort of thing. In business, it's a very different sort of flow. It's more a mental state of flow versus a physical state of flow. So I found that transition difficult, but it is there. And like now I search that out. It's funny, you know, before the call, we were talking about some sales letters I've been writing. I've been, you know, reading.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. Dan Kennedy.
Yeah. Reading Dan Kennedy's book and working myself back into that flow state around copywriting. And, you know, you have to work at these things. They have to become obsessions. And that's why I was saying to the guys yesterday that copywriting for me, it's not a brilliant skill for me. I do it well. I've been paid a lot of money to do it. I've made a lot of money doing it. And I've made a lot of money for my clients doing it. But it's something that you have to, like for me, I have to fall back in love with it. And I do love it because I had a long-term background of creative writing. So the two marry well. And, but still it's a little bit of work right at the moment because I haven't done much for a little while. It's a little bit of work to go back and go, okay, how do I become obsessed with this again? You know, how do I fall into flow and, you know, really get the most out of this? And, you know, taking this way back to our initial opening conversation of, you know, the crazy goals that people set, you know, just chasing a target becomes work.
You know, there's such a conflict there because if you look at a really world-class performer, whether it be an Olympic athlete, a swimmer, a runner, a pole vaulter, a high jumper, anybody. I was just listening to a very interesting podcast yesterday by Jocko Willink. Oh, yeah.
The Navy SEAL. And he had a guy on, you know, speaking of flow and being in the moment, he had a guy on that had been, this was an old podcast, he'd had a guy on that had been shot 27 times. And he recounted the story of that happening. You know, they breached a door. He went into a room. There was 4 guys there with machine guns shooting at him. And he went into automatic flow, was shot, knocked to the ground, pulled his pistol automatically, shot 2 of them, carried on the fight. Killed them, cleared the room, got up, called his men in, and only then realized, hey, I'm in a pretty bad shape. Now, he had body armor and stuff, so I think he was hit 16 times and 11 hit body armor. So, and he survived, he was well, he was fine. But that's, you know, he's in that like a professional sports person or something, muscle memory. He's just kicking in, going for his gun and shooting and doing what he would normally do without the thought of, oh, I've been shot, I better lay down. You know, like there's none of that in that moment.
Yeah, that's a different take on where I was going, but it's really great. And where I was going with this was, it's so common for entrepreneurs to set these big, audacious, big, hairy goals, right? The big, hairy, audacious goal, BHAGs.
Buzzword, right? Yeah.
But if you look at the true professionals, the true world-class performers, they're making incremental improvements in 100th or a 10th of a second to make the difference between a world record and a gold medal and not placing on the stand. So it's a fallacy in our own mind that we have to have these big goals. And I think this comes back to what you're all about, which is clarity. You've got to be clear on the things that are important. And the only way we can do that is by asking, and if I do this goal, why is that important? What is that going to deliver for me? If it delivers this result, why is that important? How does that move me toward my exit? And go through the Toyota model of 5 whys to get to the root cause, to get to the root level. And whenever I do this exercise with a new client, 100% of the time, they'll realize after 3 or maybe 4 whys that this is not a solution. And they would have wasted all that time and all that effort and all that focus and all those resources to a non-start and have to go back and do it again. And this is really where the role of a mentor is crucial in helping to guide the business owner to clarity for themselves, because they're too close to it. They're too close to their own situation.
It's very interesting that when I start digging, you can ask 1 or 2 whys and the money target goes out the window.
Exactly.
Every time. And that's when you start to get to the bottom of what is driving people. And like, I've got one guy that is completely about contribution. Completely about contribution. Now he's a performer. He does very, very, very well, but he doesn't do it for himself, and he doesn't do it for a monetary goal. He's doing it for his family. He's doing it for his community. He's very, and you've got to know this stuff. And as you said, like, and I think we both do, we both find clarity for our clients in the fact that we're helping them refine that 10th of a second or that 100th of a second, making the smallest shift, just helping them identify the smallest shift to give them a much clearer path forward. And
those small shifts are always masked by the noise of the big goal, or the noise of the big heavy lift, or the noise of the big operation.
I think that we may be even languaging that incorrectly, because all of that stuff that's covering that small piece is actually a massive doorway.
Mm-hmm.
And opens a massive, like, I can go back across probably every one of my clients, I would imagine, and just say that you've opened that tiny, tiny doorway, or maybe it's just you couldn't see the handle because it was covered in so much stuff. But once you grab the handle, that doorway is huge and it opens up a windfall of results.
And once again, if we look at the totality of the options that are available to us, the nuance and the subtleness of those massive power that exists in those small moves are going to be lost in everything surrounding it.
Yeah.
And as an entrepreneur, this is the thing that this is what takes sometimes decades.
Yeah.
For a business owner that's not seeking a mentor, that has had 200, 300, 500, 1,000 experiences with other business owners to see what's worked and what hasn't worked. You need that collaborative perspective in order to compress and accelerate your results.
And coming back to the confusion of making New Year's resolutions every year, layering rubbish on top of rubbish, my saying is remove the ridiculous. And you're right. Sometimes it takes decades to remove the ridiculous, to see that one little sliver of the handle, just so you can put your hand through the rubbish and grab the handle. And it is like, I believe it's the most important thing I do. Like helping people find that little sliver of clarity to put the hand through the rubbish and grab the door handle that will open a not just a doorway, but a sliding door that goes back fivefold.
It's like a garage door. You know,
100%.
it's like opening the door to a large industrial building. It's huge. And
100%.
and the thing about that is, James, is that, you know, I started my first company when I was 19, and that was way back in 1973. Most people, I mean, they were decades away from being born at that point.
Yeah.
You know, so way back when I started, when I was 19, $200, because that was all the money I had. And I built a multi-million-dollar business off that initial start. But here I am now, going on 48 years in business. And I look at the growth that I've experienced in the last 5 years is greater than the total growth up to that point. It's that hockey stick. It's that hockey stick curve that we all see in business that everybody's after. Is like all of that invested effort and those invested experiences, and they make incremental improvements until you get to a point where it inflects and it starts to go up at a huge rate.
Yeah.
And then it becomes it becomes easy. It becomes predictable.
Yeah. And well, that's something else I say, that, you know, success is a process.
Yes.
That
never ends. That never ends.
The actual process of building a business is not hard. It's removing the ridiculous so that you can grab the handle. Most people, they don't know where the handle is. They don't know what lever to pull.
Yeah, it's you know, I've been helping companies for a long time. It's been 35 years in various capacities. Some were just technical improvements on the process side of the business, and other ones were, you know, business design. And what happens always with the clients that engage with you for multiple years is that after about year 3 or year 4, they realize they've solved the business part of their life. And now it becomes about life balance and life achievement and legacy. And your shift in your view goes from being internally viewing all about me, all about my, you know, my business, my things, my cars, my house, all those material things. And the vision changes. And now you're looking out at the world going, how can I make the world a better place for my family, for my kids, for my community, for my country?
Yeah, that's one thing that well, you see in the marketplace, you see on Facebook, you see on LinkedIn, you see, you know, on all the kind of the different webs, that those New Year's resolutions are always very me focused.
Yeah.
It's always you know, I'm bad, I should be better, instead of saying,
It's coming from a position of guilt.
yeah,
And
guilt and shame, rather than actually I did all right. And this is a big thing. Like, we had a big discussion yesterday, and, you know, my guys did amazingly well in 2020. Amazingly well. I was pretty astounded, to be honest, with some of the results. Well, really all of the results. And, you know, I was making them aware of, take that and use it as a platform. Don't go, oh, you know, I didn't quite hit my goal that I wanted to last year, so I've got to, you know, write that same goal down again. It's like, no. What did you learn from last year? What worked really well? What can you refine and expand? You know, it's, again, it's simple stuff. But most people go, oh, what? I've got to learn something new. I've got to have a new target. I've got to have something bigger. I've got to learn something totally different. I've got to, you know, it's the statement of achieve business clarity, simple as, for me, is really about refining and expanding and being able to simplify that expansion. And, like over the years, I've used, remove the ridiculous, strategic simplicity, different comments and stuff that I still use. But achieving business clarity for most people is the number one thing that they need. They don't need more marketing courses. They don't need to read more books. If they had clarity, everything becomes simple.
So it's really interesting to listen to you speak of this, of clarity. And I'm always trying to step back and look at the big picture.
Yep.
And what I've noticed is that we've been taught, our education, our parents, we've been taught that the world's black or white. You either achieve it or you don't achieve it, right? But in reality, the world is about probabilities. What are the chances of our success? What are the percentages of our success? And when you begin to look at the world as a probability question, it really changes the way that you address and focus and make decisions, because you want to get it mostly right. You don't need to get it all the way right. You just need to get it mostly right. And then you get the next step mostly right. And the impact on you from a stress standpoint is tremendous, huge. Because you don't have to worry about, I didn't hit my goal exactly 100%. It's like, I got it mostly right. Yeah. And if you talk, I've had the opportunity to speak to many large business executives, CEOs of billion-dollar corporations. Yep. I've even spoken to several billionaires that have made $1 billion in real estate and other areas. And, their attitude is, when the business gets big enough, it's impossible for you to have all of the answers. So you have to learn to trust your intuition, trust your emotions. And get it mostly right, and go with 70%, 75%, and make your decision based on 75% observation. Yeah. That was brilliant to me. That was so empowering, because I realized from that point on, I didn't have to get it 100% right to still make an enormous improvement.
It's funny you mention that. Years ago, I did a meditation retreat, a silent meditation retreat for 10 days. It's called Vipassana.
Wow.
And I've been listening since the start of the year. I've been listening to the discourses again. There's 10 discourses over 10 days of he doesn't call himself a guru. He's just the guy that kind of is passing on the practice. Mr. I think it's S.N. Goenka. He's got an odd way of speaking. He's an Indian guy, and it's quite funny to listen to him. But they have a saying in that's anicca. And he's often saying anicca, 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 which is change. And it's like we have to become comfortable with change. And the practice of Vipassana is meant to remove suffering. Mm-hmm. It's really about understanding change, and that we're constantly changing. And business is much the same. People are constantly reacting instead of understanding that there will always be change, and we simply need to head on the same path.
Well, change is constant. Change is constant.
Change is a constant. And we just need, we need to move with that instead of reacting and stepping backwards from that. And that's why I find New Year's Eve resolutions are often a stepping backwards instead of a stepping forwards. They project an idea of stepping forward, but they're often a step backwards.
It's projecting forward based on the deficiencies of the past.
It's almost a a prediction of the future, a prediction of the lack of the future.
Clarity, lack of clarity.
Yeah, it's well, it's a funny funny year. Should be a it's, you know, the funny thing I find about, okay, it's 2020 and then it's 2021, is it's going to be a better year. It's like, no, it's the same. It's just another day. Are you going to be a better today, a person today? Are you going to understand that change happens and not react and not get pissed off and all the rest of it? Or are you going to think, wait for next year? You know, people are already given up on their New Year's Eve resolutions and they're waiting for next year to start again. They're settled. They've settled in for the year.
You know, I like to consider these goals as multi-dimensional. You know, the world that we live in is 3 dimensions. It's, you know, it's forward, it's backward, it's up and down, X, Y, Z. The 4th dimension is time. And those 3 dimensions move in the 4th dimension. And the 5th dimension is our ability to move forward and backward in time. And I'm not talking about time travel, but in a way that I am talking about it. It gives us the ability to move. Think about time as a river, and it's flowing, and we're in that flow. And if we relax, we just go with the flow. If we're intentional, we can swim against the flow, or we can swim sideways to the flow, or we can go with the flow. And so that's 5 dimensions right there. And most people never get past 3 in how they approach it. It's a mental exercise, a mental model to experience and explore.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. Last year, I intentionally took the course of swimming across the flow. And it was my 2nd biggest year since being in this business, which is 11 years now.
Mm-hmm.
2nd biggest year of growth. And it was intentional to stop. I wouldn't say I didn't go with the flow, but I wasn't pushing against it in any way. I was sitting in the flow versus going with it or going against it, or, you know, fighting in any direction. I sat in it. And it was very interesting to come to the end of the year, because I hadn't been forcing the sales point or any of that, and yet there was a massive growth. And, you know, sometimes we have to step back, and this is probably a conversation that I had yesterday with the guys, that you need to know what's right for you, what you do really well, and you also need to know what you're actually going to, you know, going back to that obsession, what you're actually going to become obsessed with, what actually moves the needle. And for me last year, moving the needle was staying just pretty steady in the flow, not pushing either any particular way. You know, and there were certain actions that created that. And a lot of people are constantly, and this, like with the New Year's resolutions, it's constantly, oh, I've got to go this way, I've got to go that way, I've got to do this, I've got to jump over the river, I've got to swim underneath. Instead of going, maybe you just need to sit for a year and actually appreciate what's happening around you, instead of forcing something upon yourself.
It's like watching and observing the flow of the land, because that's where the water's going to go. There may not be water there today, but the water is going to flow in that direction when you understand it. And when what you described just now about not putting the focus on sales, the thing that immediately lands for me is that you made a huge impact. And the revenue appeared because you were providing a solution. You were providing an answer that people were seeking, a result that people were seeking. And I think that that is a direct validation of the business clarity model. When you're clear about what you're doing, it's as simple as ABC. If it's that reduced, if it's been reduced down to that level of simplicity, it doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, Occam's razor says the simplest solution is the most likely one to succeed.
Yeah.
So that's what business clarity is all about.
Exactly. And that's, that's what I'm constantly working with all my guys, is to find the simplest way, the least amount of moves, the least amount of work, and not that no work has to be done, but the least amount of work, the most effective work is always the simplest way. It's, last year I even wrote, because I posted in our group, I was like, I had, I think, 158% growth. And it was the easiest year I've probably had in 5-6 years. It was very simple, very simple. And like my end of year review was about what actually worked. What was it in all of that that really worked? And, sitting
So
at night.
I would offer that everything worked. Everything worked. 100% of the activities, everything worked. But based on probabilities, some worked better than others. And the ones that didn't work so well, the opportunity there is discovering and looking into the elements of why that impacted a less than optimum outcome.
What I was going to say to that was, it's not even that certain things worked, it's that I removed all the ridiculous.
Yeah.
There was no resistance. I didn't feel any resistance last year. And that, that is clarity. And that's what I'm trying to search for with my guys. It's all the time. It's like, what is that path of least resistance, essentially?
Mm-hmm.
It was a very interesting year, and bringing that to my guys, I think a lot of them actually experienced that. There was a lot of them that had big breakthroughs, both personally and in business and in family, and some of that, removing all of that stress and resistance, and it amplifies everything you do.
I think one of the things about that, especially when you talk about family and your community and the people that work for you, with the owners that have employees, is that it's very easy to be sidetracked and influenced by the expectations of others. And unless you're crystal clear on the objectives that you're moving for, everyone is going to be lobbying for their own expectations.
Yeah.
And influencing you. And I saw this during COVID because, when we shut down here in the States and people started working remotely, I really started to see who had the discipline and who were the ones that needed somebody to maintain the discipline for them. They can't do it for themselves. They need the structure of a workplace to be productive. They can't do it on their own. And to me, that's a foreign concept because I've always been a self-starter. I've never needed governance. I've always been able to get the results faster than most. But I'm also experienced enough to know that the world isn't like me. The world isn't like you. We're who we are because we've figured this out.
Yeah.
And yet there's other people that never figure this out their entire life. They retire from their job after 30 or 40 or 50 years, and they haven't figured it out. And then they die. They die in 9 months because they have no purpose. Their purpose was to work and complain about their job, right?
That seems like, I mean, it sounds crazy to say it, but it is very true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember learning that lesson when I was young and just going, this is not the way I want to live my life. There is more to life. But it's sad. It is what it is. There will be people like that forever. I don't think we're going to have some conscious awakening that's going to wake up everyone. But
the reality is, it absolutely is not going to change, and we know this. It's proven. Again, we go back to the math. I'm a big math guy, right?
Yeah.
If we go back to 80-20, 80% of the people are never going to change because that's where they're comfortable living. Yeah. They're comfortable residing in the average, which is the 80%. Then there's 20% that are going to get 4 to 5 times the result of the 80%. And then there's the 4%, the 5% that are going to get 20 to 25 times the result of the average. And then there's the 1% that's going to get 80 to 125 times the result of the average. So our goal is to look for the 4%ers.
Yeah.
Look for the 16%ers that are just waiting to be exposed to the ideas and the possibilities that unleashes their full potential. And that to me is what is so incredibly exhilarating, to watch that potential unleashed and to see the results that were in them the whole time, but nobody had shown them the key, the lock to open that up.
I think we should wrap up on that note. And I'm going to ask the question just before we finish up, and I'll reveal mine, but what is your big target for 2021? And, speaking of, I know, and I don't mean like New Year's resolutions. I know we're always growing and always doing big things. Do you have something that is kind of a vision for the future?
Yeah.
For this year?
I want to guide 4 groups of 25 to their full potential.
Nice.
So I'm scaling my group model up, and I'm taking what's been proven with 250 companies in groups of 1 to 10 now into groups of 25 on a quarterly basis.
Who we like, and just for the people out there that if they're watching and want to know, okay, maybe Mark can help me. Who is that ideal person? Like, what business size are they? What business type?
It's any business type. I work with companies US 1 million to 10 million in revenue. That's the sweet spot. And and the business owner has to be active in their business, because I want the business owner making the decisions.
Yeah.
That's my group that I work with, that I get the best results from.
Nice. For me, it's 7, just 7. And I know you're going for a different number there, and it's all relevant, relative, whatever. For me, it's 7. The number's 7, 1 in each state, 1 business owner in each state, and taking them to the 10 million in profit mark. So a very different goal. In the past, it's been really around creating millionaires, which I've done very extensively, many of them, which has just been a super fun. So this year I wanted to challenge myself a little bit differently and take 7 to that $10 million mark. And I've done a few in the past differently. This will be all mostly, in the real estate market. So this is a specialty of mine in creating very large scalable results for that marketplace in a very simple fashion, in a fashion they may not have seen before. So it's been working very well for a couple of clients that I have. So this year, that's the goal. I'll make sure that we check in at the end of the year and see how we went on those.
Yeah, we went. I've got my first 25 already full. So
Excellent.
the first quarter's already booked, and they've already hit the ground running. So here we are. What, today's the 5th?
Yep.
They're already going. So I'm excited about that, and I'm starting to line up the next group that starts April 1st.
Awesome. 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 All right.
All right.
Well, that's a wrap for us. We will chat to you all again next week, and I will say au revoir, Mark.
Have a great week, and I'm super excited to see where we are in 7 days from now.
Yes.